Hi there guys! So as you can see from the title of this video, today I'm going to be talking a bit about change, particularly focusing on some tips on how to cope with change. I think it's quite a particularly sort of relevant topic given the time of year, you know, September, people are going back to school, back to uni, people might be going back to work after the summer holidays, that sort of thing. So a lot of things are changing. But especially sort of given the year we've had, those changes are even more different than usual this year. I mean, for me, I don't know about anyone else, but 2020 has felt like the year of change. It has changed the way we communicate, the way we go about our daily lives, the way we work, you know, a lot of us working from home. So a lot of things have changed, and have changed quite quickly as well. And things, I think, are going to continue to change, aren't they, as we adjust to this new normal that everyone keeps talking about. So this is why I hope this video is going to be helpful, just to get us thinking about how we can look after ourselves when things change. I don't know about anyone else, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never met anyone who has told me that they enjoy change. I think as humans, we're wired to sort of want to stay in our little comfort zones, our little safe little bubbles, and you know, change is scary. So yeah, so I think it's quite obvious that nobody really likes change. We're all creatures of habit, aren't we? But sadly, change is something in life that is inevitable. For things to move forward, for us to progress, things have to change. So learning to cope with that change is really important. The reason we struggle so much with change is because it changes how we identify ourselves. So things like getting a new job, or going through a breakup, or getting married, or moving house, moving school, it changes how we view ourselves. Those things are big parts of our identity. So, you know, our relationship status forms our identity. Our job role is a part of our identity. Where we go to school or university is part of our identity. So when those things change, when we transition from one identity to another, it can make us feel a bit lost and a bit uncertain, feel a bit unstable. And when we feel out of control, that's when the anxiety creeps in. So yeah, that is one reason we don't like change, is because it shakes up how we identify ourselves, and makes us sort of question things. Another reason that we don't like change is because there's always that element of risk when something changes, be it a positive or a negative change, sorry. There's always sort of an element of risk that something could go wrong. Like I say, even if it's something positive like moving house or a new job, we always sort of fear that something will go wrong. So that's another reason why we don't particularly like change. So yeah, now let's move on to sort of how we can cope with change. So there are two different sort of styles of coping with change. One of them being sort of more positive than the other, let's say. So the first sort of coping style, or coping mechanism, is sort of an escape style of coping. So this is where we are in a state of denial that the change is happening, and we will sort of avoid everything to do with that change, so that we can pretend that everything's the same and nothing's happening. And that's our brain's way of sort of putting it off, because we don't feel strong enough to process what's going on at the minute. It's all too much. So in the short term, that can be okay, but when we're in that denial for a longer period of time, it can actually make it worse for us when that change does happen, because we've not taken the necessary steps to sort of adjust to that change, and it can come as a bit of a shock. So where we can, let's try and avoid that way of coping. The other sort of coping style, which is the more positive one, is sort of a control coping style for change. This is when we sort of acknowledge how we feel about it, we manage those feelings. That can be by talking to people. We'll get support if we need to manage that change. You know, doing everything we can to be a part of that change. So being proactive and sort of preparing ourselves for that change rather than being reactive and reacting when that change happens. So as best we can, we want to sort of strive for that second style of coping where we are sort of, like I said, being a part of that change and working with ourselves and giving ourselves the best chance to sort of cope with it as well as we possibly can. So now we've talked a bit about all that stuff, we're now going to move on to some tips on how to manage change. So the first thing that I would suggest is to really sort of acknowledge as best as you can that things are changing. You know, we're trying to move away from that avoidance, denial way of coping and really face up to what's going on around us. You know, and it might be that we don't like that things are changing and it's making us feel anxious or angry or sad, and that's okay. They are all totally valid feelings and valid responses to change. Like I said at the very beginning, people don't like change, but unfortunately it is something that has to happen sometimes. But by acknowledging that things are changing rather than sort of being in denial about it, we are giving ourselves the best chance to look after ourselves and look after our well-being. My next tip would be to sort of have a look at and try and evaluate how much control you have over what is changing. I've mentioned this in sort of videos before about anxiety, but a lot of the time with anxiety we worry about things that are out of our control, and if things are out of our control, then us worrying about it isn't going to change anything. I appreciate that that's easier said than done, but over time with practice that can help sort of alleviate some of those anxieties. A good easy task that you can do, and we've got videos of this on our Instagram page if you want to have a look, but there's a task called circles of control. So you can draw a circle, within that circle we write down what we can control, then all around that circle are things that we cannot control. If you want that in more depth, like I say, head to our Instagram account, it's sort of highlighted there. But that is a great way of sort of looking at what can I control, what can't I control. The things I can't control, we can put them to one side and not spend all our energy worrying about those things. I think especially with change, a lot of the time it is going to be out of our control, and unfortunately it's just about coming to terms with that. So yeah, that's tip number 2. My next tip would be try and keep everything else sort of as close to your regular routine as you can, because if too many things are changing all at once, then you're going to feel overwhelmed and that's going to be really difficult to manage. So if you've got quite a good routine, try and stick to that as best you can. That'll help sort of ground you and help sort of soothe some of those anxieties that, you know, not everything is changing, it's just one element and all these other elements are the same. So if you, I don't know, like to get up at a certain time, or you know, you watch a certain thing on telly after work or that sort of thing, try and keep those things the same. Like I say, it'll just help bring a sense of normality back and help you feel a bit less overwhelmed. And then finally, another thing that might help is trying to write a list of the positives that will come out of this change. Like I say, a change, even a positive change, can make us feel really scared and anxious. So it's good to sort of write down the things, you know, remind yourself of the good things in that, with that change. And the same goes for a negative change. You know, if something's happening and changing and you don't like it, you know, try and sit down and have a think of the positives that could come out of that, and that'll just help sort of shift your mindset, so that we're not focusing on the negatives. you know, when we're feeling anxious and feeling a bit down, then we do tend to focus on the negative stuff. So, you know, putting time aside to sit down, write a list of all the good stuff can really help to sort of change our outlook and how we look at things. So there we have it. We've talked about change and we talked about how we can hopefully cope with that a bit better. So there we go. I hope that you found it useful. I hope that you've learned something, and I hope that you now feel better able to deal with any changes that come your way. Because yeah, it's you know, it's that time of year, isn't it, when a lot of things are changing, especially with everything going on in the world at the minute. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.